June 5, 1944, 2:17 a.m., Southern England. A cold mist rolls across a silent field near Dover. Moonlight glints off steel helmets. Rows of Sherman tanks wait in formation. At least that's what a German reconnaissance pilot will report by sunrise. From above, the shapes are perfect, turrets angled just right, gun barrels pointing toward the channel. Even the shadows fall convincingly across the grass. A supply convoy sits nearby. Trucks, artillery pieces, fuel dumps. An invasion army. But on the ground, there is no rumble of engines, no smell of oil, no nervous infantry smoking cigarettes before embarkation. Only canvas. The tank nearest the hedgerow sags slightly as a young Royal Engineer named Captain David Strangeways presses his boot against its flank. The rubber skin dimples inward like a child's toy. He steps back, hands on hips, scanning the horizon. In a few hours, German aerial cameras will photograph this field. The film will be rushed to analysts in Paris. Measurements will be taken, units identified, conclusions drawn. And those conclusions will help decide where Adolf Hitler sends his last armored reserves. Strangeways knows this. You can almost feel the weight of it pressing against his ribs. He turns toward the coastline. Beyond the cliffs of Dover lies the narrowest stretch of the English Channel, 20 miles of dark water, and somewhere across it the Luftwaffe still watches. Tonight they must see exactly what he wants them to see. The deception had been building for months. Operation Fortitude. Not a single fake tank, but an entire phantom invasion force, the 1st U.S. Army Group, supposedly commanded by General George S. Patton, the most aggressive, feared American general in German intelligence reports. Patton was real. His temper was real. His victories in Sicily were real. But the army he now commanded in southeast England? It existed only in fabric, plywood, and radio waves. Strangeways was no ordinary officer, a former film producer and illusionist in spirit. He understood something many generals did not. War was theater, and the Germans were the audience. He had studied their habits. They trusted aerial reconnaissance. They trusted intercepted radio chatter. They believed that the main Allied invasion would strike at Pas de Calais, the shortest crossing to France. So Strangeways gave them exactly that story. Day after day, dummy landing craft crowded harbors along the Kent coastline. Inflatable tanks rolled into open fields during daylight hours. At night, trucks, real trucks, drove in endless circles to create dust clouds visible from above. Meanwhile, radio operators tapped out an entire fictional order of battle. Divisions that did not exist requested supplies. Corps commanders transmitted planning instructions. Engineers discussed embarkation schedules. The airwaves crackled with lies. German signals intelligence listened carefully, and they believed it, because the details were perfect. But deception is fragile. One misplaced unit insignia, one contradictory message, one careless movement spotted by a reconnaissance plane, and the illusion collapses. Strangeways understood the risk. He knew the Germans would scrutinize every detail. The Abwehr, the Luftwaffe analysts, the intelligence staff at OB West under Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt. They were not fools, which meant the lie had to be stronger than the truth. Inside a canvas operations tent near Dover, Strangeways studies a map pinned to a wooden board. Red markers cluster around Calais, blue markers around Normandy.
The real invasion, Operation Overlord, will land far to the west, on beaches codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. But if even a few German panzer divisions remain near Calais, if they hesitate, if they wait for Patton's real attack, then the men landing in Normandy will have a fighting chance. He runs his finger along the French coastline. The success of D-Day does not depend only on soldiers storming beaches. It depends on convincing the enemy to look the wrong way. Outside, a breeze ripples through the inflatable armor. A tank turret shifts slightly, squeaking against its frame. For a moment, it almost looks alive. By dawn, German cameras will capture the image, and somewhere in a bunker in France, an intelligence officer will nod and say, yes, the main blow will fall at Pas de Calais. If he is wrong, tens of thousands of Allied soldiers will die. If he is right, Hitler's reserves will remain frozen in place. The sun begins to rise over southern England. Strangeways doesn't smile, because the greatest trick is not fooling the enemy once, it's keeping them fooled long enough for history to turn. And tomorrow, the real invasion begins.
Dawn breaks over Kent in pale gray streaks. The mist thins. From 15,000 feet above the channel, a lone Luftwaffe reconnaissance aircraft banks slowly, its camera ports opening like mechanical eyelids. The pilot never hears the faint hiss of canvas shifting below. He sees only what he expects to see. Through his lens, entire armored columns sit poised for embarkation. Landing craft cluster along the Thames estuary. Supply depots stretch for miles. Railheads overflow with American equipment marked in bold white stars. The film rolls. Back in England, Strangeways watches from behind a hedgerow as British soldiers, stagehands in khaki, adjust the angle of a dummy artillery piece. They work with deliberate care. From the air, angles matter. Shadows matter. Even the spacing between vehicles must match standard U.S. Army doctrine. He had studied American manuals obsessively. If the Germans measured the distance between tents, it had to be correct. If they counted vehicles in a motor pool, the ratio had to make sense. If they compared radio call signs to known units, everything had to align. War, to Strangeways, was no different from film production. The audience must never glimpse the scaffolding. Inside a farmhouse converted into a planning office, radio operators tap out coded chatter. Call signs assigned to imaginary divisions, the 14th Army, the 20th Armored, the 59th Infantry, fill the airwaves. None of these units exist, yet their fictional quartermasters complain about fuel shortages. Their fictional colonels request updated tide charts for Calais. Their fictional engineers debate the weight limits of landing ramps. German signal stations in northern France intercept it all. At OB West, analysts compare traffic volume to known Allied patterns. It matches. The buildup appears massive, sustained, convincing. And at the center of it all stands one very real name, General George S. Patton. The Germans respected Patton, feared him. His rapid advance across Sicily had burned into their intelligence briefings. To them, he was aggressive, decisive, exactly the kind of commander chosen to lead the main invasion. So when reports place Patton in southeast England inspecting troops, reviewing formations, addressing officers, it feels logical. Because sometimes the best lie is the one the enemy already believes. Strangeways insisted on that detail. Patton had to be visible. Motorcades were arranged, photographs were staged. Controlled leaks ensured German spies heard just enough. Even double agents fed information into Berlin, carefully curated fragments reinforcing the Calais narrative. One of those agents, operating under British control, transmitted message after message confirming that the 1st U.S. Army Group was preparing for a direct assault on the narrowest part of the channel. Berlin trusted him completely, because they had no reason not to. But deception demands pressure, and pressure reveals cracks. In early May 1944, a problem emerges. German reconnaissance flights decrease. Allied air superiority is tightening the skies over France. If the Luftwaffe cannot photograph the Phantom Army regularly, doubt may creep in. Strangeways adapts. If they cannot see enough from the air, they must hear more on the radio. Signal traffic intensifies. Entire fictional corps conduct planning conferences over wireless. Weather reports are requested hourly for the Pas-de-Calais region. Engineers calculate embarkation times. The illusion grows louder. In France, German analysts nod grimly. The invasion is coming, and it will strike where geography makes sense, at Calais, where the distance is shortest, where ports are closest, where logic points. They begin reinforcing it. Meanwhile, far to the west in Devon and Cornwall, the real invasion force prepares in relative silence. Men board landing craft under blackout conditions. Paratroopers rehearse night drops. Naval convoys assemble beyond the horizon. The contrast is deliberate. Noise in Kent, silence in the west. Strangeways stands again in that windswept field of rubber tanks. The canvas gleams under afternoon sun. To a distant observer, it looks like unstoppable steel. He knows what hangs in the balance. If the German 15th Army remains pinned near Calais after the landings begin in Normandy, the Allies gain precious hours, maybe days. If those panzer divisions move immediately towards Omaha and Utah, the beaches could become slaughterhouses. He presses his palm against the side of an inflatable Sherman once more. The rubber is warm now. Fragile. So fragile. And yet, this fragile illusion may weigh more than armor plate. On June 3rd, intercepted German communications reveal something extraordinary. Berlin is convinced. High Command assesses that even if landings occur elsewhere, they will be diversions. The main blow will fall at Pas-de-Calais under Patton. Strangeways reads the intelligence summary twice. The trap is set. But deception does not end when the invasion begins. It must survive contact with reality. And in less than 48 hours, reality will explode across the beaches of Normandy. The question is not whether the Germans will fight. The question is whether they will wait.
June 6, 1944, 12:18 a.m. Skies above Normandy. Engines roar through the darkness. Hundreds of C-47 Dakotas drone low over hedgerows and flooded fields. Red lights blink inside their fuselages. Paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne stand hooked to static lines, faces blackened, hands gripping rifles. Then the green light flashes. Men vanish into the night. Far below, German sentries stare upward, confused by the sudden thunder overhead. Anti-aircraft fire claws at the sky. Parachutes bloom like pale flowers in the moonlight. The invasion has begun. But in bunkers near Pas-de-Calais, officers of the German 15th Army remain tense, waiting for something bigger. Because Berlin is convinced this is not it. At OB West, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt receives fragmented reports of landings along the Normandy coast, beachheads, naval bombardment, airborne drops. But the intelligence picture remains clouded by fortitude. Intercepted radio traffic still points to massive formations in southeast England under General George S. Patton. Dummy divisions, alive only in British codebooks, continue to chatter across the airwaves. To German analysts, Normandy looks like a feint, a diversion to pull reserves away from the real target, Calais. And so the most powerful armored units in northern France hesitate. The 1st SS Panzer Division, the 12th SS Hitlerjugend, elements of the 2nd Panzer. They wait for orders that do not come. Because Adolf Hitler himself must authorize the release of key reserves, and he is asleep when the first reports arrive. Hours pass. On Omaha Beach, American infantry of the 1st and 29th Divisions struggle through murderous machine gun fire. Landing craft explode in the surf. Officers fall before giving orders. The tide runs red against obstacles of steel and timber. Every minute matters. You can almost hear the clock ticking in Berlin. Back in Kent, the fake army continues its performance. Radio operators maintain relentless transmissions. Engineers discuss embarkation delays due to weather in the Channel. Supply units report fuel stockpiles ready for movement toward Calais. The illusion does not blink. Strangeways insists on it. If German intelligence detects a sudden drop in activity, suspicion could bloom. The deception must hold not only before D-Day, but during it. And astonishingly, it does. By midday on June 6th, Hitler is informed of the landings. He studies maps, confers with advisors. The reports from Normandy are troubling, but not decisive. Because the main invasion, he believes, has yet to fall. He refuses to commit the full weight of the 15th Army. Panzer divisions near Calais remain in place. Rundstedt urges flexibility. Others argue for caution. The ghost of Patton's phantom army looms larger than the real Allied soldiers fighting for survival on the beaches. Fortitude has done something extraordinary. It has paralyzed decision-making. In Normandy, the cost is staggering. At Omaha, units cling to bluffs under relentless fire. On Sword and Juno, British and Canadian forces push inland against stiff resistance. Casualty reports mount. Confusion reigns. Yet the feared mass counterattack from Calais does not arrive. Not that day, not the next. Because German high command remains convinced that Normandy is merely phase 1 of a larger deception. They expect Patton's blow at any moment. In England, Strangeways receives intelligence updates confirming that the Germans still believe in the 1st U.S. Army Group. Even after the beaches are secured, even after Allied troops begin advancing inland, Berlin maintains that the decisive invasion is coming at Calais. The inflatable tanks remain in place. The dummy landing craft crowd the harbors. The radio chatter continues without pause. An entire army, made of air and fabric, holds down real divisions of seasoned German soldiers. For days, for weeks. The 15th Army stays anchored near Calais long after it becomes clear that Normandy is no mere diversion. By the time reality pierces the illusion, Allied forces have broken out from the beachheads. Ports are secured. Reinforcements flood in. The window has closed. Strangeways stands once more among the rubber Shermans, now weathered by rain and wind. He looks toward the Channel, where real convoys once sailed into history. The deception had not fired a single shot, yet it shaped the battlefield as surely as any artillery barrage. And somewhere in Germany, analysts begin to realize what has happened. They were not outgunned, they were outplayed. But the final revelation, the moment Berlin understands the scale of the trick, is still to come.
July 1944. A bunker outside Paris. Maps are no longer neat. Pins have multiplied across Normandy. Blue arrows, Allied advances, stretch inland toward Saint-Lô and Caen. Red markers, German divisions, are thinning. The room smells of sweat and stale tobacco. An intelligence officer studies the latest aerial photographs. There are no massive embarkation fleets in the Thames now. No sudden surge of movement toward Calais. The expected second invasion has not materialized. He feels it before he says it. They have been deceived. For weeks after D-Day, Berlin clung to the belief that Normandy was a diversion. Even as Allied forces poured men and materiel into France, the 15th Army remained positioned near Pas-de-Calais. Hitler was certain Patton would strike soon. The Allies were too cunning, too methodical, to reveal their main effort immediately. Normandy was bait. And so armored divisions that could have crushed the fragile beachhead stayed idle. Fuel burned in readiness. Crews waited inside steel hulls. Engines idled for an invasion that never came. The Phantom Army had achieved something extraordinary. It had frozen reality. But by mid-July, facts became undeniable. Allied forces broke through German lines during Operation Cobra. American troops surged west and south. British and Canadian units ground forward around Caen. Supply lines across the Channel were now secure and relentless. The weight of Allied production, tanks, trucks, aircraft, pressed forward without pause. And there was still no sign of Patton crossing at Calais. German analysts began reviewing earlier intelligence, the radio traffic, the reconnaissance photos, the reports from double agents. Patterns that once seemed convincing now looked too perfect, too clean, too deliberate. The realization did not arrive as a dramatic shout. It crept in like a chill. They had been manipulated. Somewhere in England, many of the inflatable tanks were quietly deflated, canvas folded, dummy landing craft dismantled, radio networks reduced. The stage was being struck, but its impact lingered across the battlefield. The 15th Army, which might have counterattacked during those critical first days in June, had lost its moment. When orders finally came to move elements toward Normandy, Allied air superiority punished every column on the roads. Fighter bombers roamed freely, bridges were shattered, convoys burned. Time, the most precious commodity of D-Day, had already been spent, and it had been bought with illusion. Captain David Strangeways would not receive the same public recognition as the men who stormed Omaha were parachuted into darkness. His battlefield had been fields of rubber and radio waves. But deception is not passive. It demands imagination, precision, nerve. Because if the enemy sees through the curtain, the consequences are immediate and catastrophic. Strangeways had gambled that German high command would trust its assumptions, that geography and logic would guide them straight into the trap. He was right. By late summer 1944, Allied forces closed the Falaise pocket, encircling thousands of German troops. Paris was liberated. The front surged eastward toward Germany itself. And in hindsight, the brilliance of Operation Fortitude became clear. The success of D-Day was not only forged in blood on the beaches. It was shaped months earlier in quiet English fields where inflatable tanks cast convincing shadows, in radio rooms where fictional officers argued over imaginary fuel shortages, in the decision to place General George Patton, the most feared Allied commander in German eyes, at the center of a lie. War had become theater, and the audience had applauded the wrong act. There is something unsettling about it. An entire army that never existed altered the course of history. No medals clinked against its uniforms, no graves marked its fallen. Yet its presence, invisible and undeniable, held back divisions that could have changed June 6th forever. And perhaps that is the final irony. The men who stormed Normandy fought against bullets and artillery, but before they ever touched French sand, they were saved by air, by fabric, by sound, by one British engineer who understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon in war is not steel, it is belief.